Thank you so much, Mr. President. I rise to join my colleagues on the other side who represent states who know a little bit about energy, and certainly my colleague from North Dakota who has led this effort from the first day that he arrived in the United States Senate. No big surprise, because we know that you can have as much oil out there, you can know where the reserves are, but if you don't have the infrastructure to move that oil to market, what you do is you drive up prices. And everybody who is looking at what we're looking at right now, I haven't checked today, but oil prices below $40 a barrel. If you don't think that's supply-demand economics 101, you don't understand what's happening. The fact that we have known reserves in places like North Dakota, known reserves in Alaska, we have producible reserves in Canada, we have an opportunity to continue to develop these resources in a way that benefit in an incredible way American consumers. Think about what's happening for the average American family today when they fill up in the pump, and think what that means and how that will ripple through our economy as discretionary income grows. But that is only possible when we have a known supply that is movable, it's transportable, it is in fact capable of reaching its market or reaching the refinery. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about North American crude oil. Now, you're going to hear a lot of stories over this debate about how this crude oil is more dangerous to the environment, how it is different than Bakken crude. Guess what? It is different than Bakken crude, but it's not different from the crude that's refined in the refineries in Texas where we will be displacing crude that is refined from Venezuela, and we are going to be replacing it with crude that is produced in our friends to the north, Canada. And so infrastructure is a huge part. In fact, that's why Secretary Moniz, when he declared the quadrennial energy review, he looked at not just where's the supply and the future of supply of energy, he focused on transportation of energy, because that's a huge part of our challenge today. And as we look at the Keystone XL pipeline, and we say Keystone XL because a lot of people don't know, we already have a Keystone pipeline. We already have a pipeline that is bringing oil sands from Canada into the United States for refinery. A lot of people don't realize this. This is the second pipeline that will be named Keystone. And it is a pipeline that has been in process for literally a decade, from their planning process to the time that they actually ask for a permit. Now, I'm going to address some of the concerns of some of my colleagues as we hear them, just so that we can kind of lay the groundwork. When you frequently hear the Keystone XL pipeline will be exported. All of the oil that's coming down will find its way directly into China. Guess what? That gets said all the time. And guess what the Washington Post gave it? 3 Pinocchios. Not true. It's going to get refined. It's going to get refined in the United States of America. It's going to displace Venezuelan crude, and it is going to find its way into the American markets and continue to provide that supply that is, in fact, today driving down costs. And so let's get rid of that first argument, that this is going to somehow not benefit American consumers, that this is going to somehow find its way, onto a barge immediately upon arrival into the Gulf. So that's the first thing that we need to be talking about, which is let's actually have a fact-based discussion about what this pipeline is. The second argument you will hear is that this somehow will have a huge effect on climate and on climate change. And for those reasons alone, it ought to be rejected. Well, let's take a look at what the experts who have repeatedly looked at this very issue. Because one thing that we know that I think is beyond dispute when you talk to the officials in Canada is that we are going to produce oil from Canada regardless of whether we build a pipeline. And that oil is going to find its way into the transportation system and, quite honestly, is going to burden our rail transportation system because we haven't figured out how to build a pipeline. So all those people who want to confuse the issue about the pipeline versus the development in Canada of the oil sands, let's separate it. Let's look at what, in fact, is the decision before the United States of America. And that is the decision of whether it's in our national interest to approve a permit for a pipeline. I will say this over and over again as we pursue this debate. This is a pipeline and not a cause. So many people have talked about it, and I think in some ways this process has gotten exaggerated on both sides. I mean, it's going to be the panacea and going to prevent all unemployment, or it's going to be the worst thing, Armageddon for the environment. And you know what? This is a pipeline. This is a transportation system. This is an essential part of the infrastructure to bring an important fossil fuel into our country so that it can be refined and utilized by the American people. And oh, by the way, knowing those reserves are there, knowing that we've got the reserves that we have in the Bakken, knowing that we're developing more and more untraditional sources of supply has driven the price down, has created the situation that we have today that is saving consumers millions and billions of dollars in our country. The second thing I want to say is people say, we got to respect the process. I respect process. That's part of what I've done my whole life. I'm a lawyer, and so you hear repeatedly about due process and the need to have due process. But you know what? Occasionally, the process is broken. Guess what? 6 years to site a pipeline. Back to the process. When you look at it, 6 years. You know what? We fought World War II and defeated the greatest evil known to mankind, Adolf Hitler, in 4. And we can't site a pipeline in 6. So the process is broken. The other thing you're going to hear is, this is going to somehow disrupt what's happening in Nebraska. I think the senator from North Dakota was absolutely correct as part of this bill in putting a provision in that says all bets are off if Nebraska reverses the decisions that were made in Nebraska. But somehow that's getting forgotten in this debate. And so we're going to have a lot of hours of debate, I think, on Keystone XL pipeline. We're going to have a lot of amendments. I'm grateful for the opportunity to go back to regular order. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about amendments. But I want so badly that us to have a reasoned and factual-based debate. Not an emotional debate, but a debate that basically puts this pipeline in perspective, and so puts this issue in perspective. And so I want to congratulate my colleague from North Dakota for the success in raising this issue and getting this issue its early debate. I hope that we'll be able to move this along, that we'll be successful in getting enough people to provide that momentum to achieve ready approval. And finally, I want to say why it's so important that we do it now. For those of us who live in the northern tier, we know what a construction season is. And you can't begin to put pipe in the ground in September and October, not without a lot of additional costs, which we've already burdened this pipeline with. And so we need to make this decision. We need to get this decision done yet this spring as early as possible so that plans can be made, so that people can begin their construction season, and we can begin to rationally address the infrastructure need for development of our energy resources in North America. And so with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.